World on the edge. Why the US and Israel just launched massive airstrikes on Iran, and what happens next could change everything. Good evening. This is a special report from the Global News Desk. The date is 28 February 2026. By the time you see this broadcast, the world as we knew it just hours ago has changed. The long-feared shadow of a direct, full-scale war between Iran and the US-Israel alliance has materialized with a terrifying clarity that has turned the skies of the Middle East into a furnace. At exactly 8:15 a.m. Jerusalem time, which was 9:45 a.m. local time in Tehran, the quiet of a Saturday morning was shattered. What Israeli officials are calling Operation Lion's Roar, the largest and most complex aerial campaign in the history of the Israeli Air Force, began. Let me take you back to that moment. Residents of Tehran reported hearing the low hum of drones overhead, a sound that has become sickeningly familiar in modern warfare, followed by the deafening roar of jet fighters. Within seconds, the first explosions rippled across the capital. Plumes of black smoke began to rise from government compounds and military installations. The targets were not random, they were surgical, symbolic, and strategic. According to reports confirmed by Israeli military spokespersons and later by Pentagon officials, the first wave of strikes focused on what they termed the command and control of terror. In Tehran, explosions were reported very near the offices of the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. While his exact location at the time of the blast remains unconfirmed, the message was clear. The regime's leadership was in the crosshairs. Simultaneously, other high-value targets in the capital were struck. These included the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Intelligence, the headquarters of the Atomic Energy Organization, and even the compound of the Presidential Palace. But this was not just an attack on Tehran. It was a campaign to decapitate Iran's military capabilities nationwide. Approximately 200 Israeli fighter jets, supported by American assets, conducted simultaneous strikes on an estimated 500 targets across 28 regions of the country. In the western and central parts of Iran, the primary objective was to punch a hole in Iran's sophisticated air defense network, which had been a significant barrier in previous conflicts. Once that shield was weakened, the second wave of aircraft moved in to strike at the heart of Iran's missile program, large underground missile arsenals and production facilities. Key nuclear sites also came under fire. Facilities in Isfahan, home to one of Iran's most critical nuclear conversion plants, and the Fordo facility, buried deep inside a mountain, were reportedly targeted. While the extent of the damage is difficult to assess independently due to the immediate media blackout imposed by Tehran, the sheer scale of the operation suggests a determined effort to set back the program by years. In Karaj and near the holy city of Qom, other nuclear-related facilities were hit. The Talegan compound in Tehran was specifically singled out by the Israeli army, which claimed it was a site linked to the covert Ahmad project, allegedly used for developing nuclear weapons and conducting sensitive experiments with advanced explosives. Further east, in Tabriz, Kermanshah, and Desful, the strikes targeted the aerospace forces of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. In the south, naval facilities belonging to the IRGC Navy were set ablaze. The goal, as stated by US President Donald Trump in a video address posted on social media an hour after the strikes began, was simple but monumental. We have begun a large-scale military operation in Iran. We will eliminate the threat posed by the brutal Iranian regime. We will destroy Iranian missiles, their production facilities, and the country's naval forces. President Trump framed this not just as a military necessity but as a liberation. In his 8-minute address, he listed grievances dating back to the 1979 revolution and urged the Iranian people to rise up. "Your hour of freedom has arrived," he said. "When we finish, take control of your government. It will be yours to take. This will likely be your only chance for generations." This rhetoric was echoed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who stated that the operation was designed not only to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons but also to create conditions for the brave Iranian people to take their fate into their own hands. He directly addressed the various ethnic groups within Iran, urging them to cast off the yoke of tyranny. The justifications from Washington and Jerusalem were rooted in the concept of an imminent threat. For months, indirect negotiations in Geneva had stalled. The US and its allies demanded stricter oversight and verification of Iran's nuclear activities, while Tehran insisted on the lifting of crippling sanctions first. The diplomatic track had run cold, and the military track was now white-hot. However, as the sun rose higher over the region, the world quickly realized that this would not be a one-sided affair. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, true to its word, did not stay its hand. Within hours of the initial blasts, Tehran activated its massive retaliatory capability. The first sign of the response came with the activation of air raid sirens across Israel. From the northern borders with Lebanon and Syria, down to the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, and even towards Jerusalem, the skies were once again filled with the threat of inbound projectiles. The Iranians launched what they described as Operation True Promise, utilizing a mix of weaponry. State media and the IRGC announced the use of Khorramshahr multi-warhead missiles, Khyber Shekan missiles carrying one-ton warheads, as well as Fattah and Qaeda missiles, alongside waves of suicide drones. But the retaliation was not confined to Israel. Iran expanded the battlefield across the entire Persian Gulf region. Simultaneous missile and drone attacks were launched against American military assets throughout the Middle East. In Bahrain, home to the US Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters at Naval Support Activity Bahrain, footage emerged on social media appearing to show a ballistic missile slamming into the base, triggering a massive fire that authorities struggled for hours to contain. Witnesses in the area reported huge columns of smoke rising from the naval facility. In Kuwait, sirens and explosions were heard near Camp Tarifjan, the forward headquarters of US Army Central and Ali Al Salam Air Base. In Qatar, the massive Al Udeid Air Base, which hosts around 10,000 troops and serves as the forward headquarters for US Central Command, was also targeted, forcing the closure of Qatari airspace and grounding all flights for Qatar Airways. The United Arab Emirates, a hub of global commerce and tourism, found itself on the front line. Missiles struck near Al Dhafra Air Base, south of Abu Dhabi, which is shared with the UAE Air Force. More shockingly, civilian areas were hit. In Abu Dhabi, shrapnel from an intercepted missile killed at least one person. In Dubai, the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa, was evacuated after explosions were heard in the distance. Panic spread on social media with reports of missile fragments landing near the Atlantis Hotel and another strike hitting the artificial island of Palm Jumeirah, causing injuries and igniting fires. In a dramatic escalation with global economic implications, the IRGC announced the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow chokepoint through which about 20% of the world's oil passes. This act alone sent shockwaves through global markets, effectively declaring a naval blockade that could cripple energy supplies. Even Jordan and Iraq were not spared from the chaos. Both nations closed their airspace as sirens sounded, and reports emerged of missiles landing near US interests within their borders. The Houthi movement in Yemen, backed by Iran, vowed to resume attacks on Red Sea shipping and Israel, threatening to reopen a maritime front that had been relatively quiet. The human toll of this first day of war is still being tallied, and the reports are often conflicting, a hallmark of the fog of war. Early estimates from various wire services and local media suggest that the US and Israeli strikes have killed approximately 1,300 people and injured more than 10,000 across Iran. However, these numbers are impossible to verify independently due to the near-total internet shutdown imposed by Tehran, which has disrupted mobile communications and left state television as the only source of information for many Iranians. One of the most tragic and controversial reports to emerge from Iran came from the state-run IRNA news agency. They claimed that a missile, either from the initial strikes or debris from an interceptor, struck a girls' school in the southern Minab district, killing at least 57 people and wounding 45 others. If confirmed, this would represent a significant civilian casualty event that the international community will almost certainly seize upon. Iranian media also reported that 40 people died in another strike in the south, though details remain sparse. On the Israeli side, the physical damage appears to be less severe, thanks to the multi-layered air defense systems like the Iron Dome and Arrow system. Lt. Colonel Nadav Shoshni, an Israeli military spokesman, stated that while there had been no significant direct hits on infrastructure, shrapnel from interceptors and falling debris had damaged homes in several areas, particularly in the north. Emergency services reported only a few minor injuries, a testament to the effectiveness of the defenses and the immediate orders for citizens to seek shelter. The international reaction has been swift and divided, reflecting the deep geopolitical fissures that have defined the post-Cold War era. Russia and Pakistan immediately condemned the attacks on Iran, calling for an immediate cessation of hostilities and a return to diplomatic solutions. China, likely to follow suit, has yet to issue an official statement but is expected to call for restraint. In the West, the response has been more supportive of the US and Israeli position. The United Kingdom, Canada, and Australia issued statements expressing their understanding of the need to counter the Iranian threat. The President of France expressed hope that the violence would be short-lived and that Iran would return to the negotiating table. However, the Arab world is walking a tightrope. While Egypt condemned the Iranian attacks on the sovereignty of brotherly Arab countries like the UAE and Bahrain, it stopped short of endorsing the US-Israeli strikes, highlighting the uncomfortable position of Gulf states who are now directly in the line of fire. A critical wildcard in this conflict is Lebanon and Hezbollah. Following the outbreak of war, the Lebanese government held an emergency session, with its president emphasizing the need for neutrality to prevent Lebanon from being dragged into the conflict. Hezbollah has raised its alert level, issuing statements of solidarity with Iran but stopping short of launching a full-scale assault on Israel. Reports suggest they are adopting a wait-and-see approach, sending a message that they will only intervene if their specific red lines are crossed. However, Israel has warned that if Hezbollah enters the fight, it will pay a very high price, a threat that could turn the northern border into a hellscape far worse than the current situation. As night falls over the Middle East on this 28th day of February, the situation remains fluid and terrifyingly unpredictable. Commercial aviation has ground to a halt. Major airlines like Virgin Atlantic, KLM, and Turkish Airlines have suspended flights to and from the region, rerouting planes far away from the danger zones. The US Abraham Lincoln and the US Gerald R. Ford carrier strike groups are positioned in the region, a massive naval armada that serves as both a deterrent and a potential launchpad for further strikes. We have reports that Supreme Leader Khamenei has been moved to a secure, undisclosed location. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has told Western media that the leadership is alive and well, but the regime has declared that there are no red lines left. A senior Iranian official, speaking anonymously to Al Jazeera, warned that everything is possible, including scenarios previously not considered. What began as a dawn assault has spiraled into a multi-front war. The question now is not whether this will escalate further, but how far and how fast. Will this remain a war of missiles and air power, or will we see ground invasions? Will the Strait of Hormuz remain closed, triggering a global energy crisis? And will the people of Iran, urged by foreign leaders to rise up, take to the streets while their cities are under bombardment? For now, we are left with the images. Smoke over Tehran, fire at a naval base in Bahrain, evacuations from the Burj Khalifa, and the wail of sirens from the banks of the Jordan River to the shores of the Persian Gulf. The year is 2026, and the unthinkable war has begun. We will continue to monitor these developments around the clock and bring you updates as the situation warrants. This is the Global News Desk. Stay safe.